I'm not quite sure how I feel about Inside Number 9, what is easily one of the BBC's best shows of the 21st century, coming to an end. I've tried rewriting and rephrasing that sentence several times because in some ways I could call Inside Number 9 the best BBC comedy, drama or horror. Inside Number 9 is such a loose and free format, unlike any other anthology show I can think of, and it straddled so many genres and excelled in all of them over the years, and the idea of it not being around anymore is going to be a serious adjustment for me. But it should end at Series 9, just like it wouldn't make sense to broadcast a Christmas special not at Christmas. Which, admittedly, Inside Number 9 has done before. But it is called Inside Number 9. It should end here. It would just feel wrong to have an Inside Number 9 Series 10. Just like it feels more appropriate to have a trilogy of films instead of 2 or 4. That's basically the entire reason that The Godfather Part 3 exists. And it's why The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy called itself a trilogy of 5, drawing attention to the fact it's being purposefully obtuse. So just like I always do, I'm going to talk about these last 6 episodes, and possibly start crying in the middle. The series starts with Boo to a Goose, and it's a daring and very hyper-specific series opener, because for this to work in the best way intended, you need to have experienced the London Underground at least once. I've used public transport in other countries, and I've never experienced the same atmosphere on an underground train system in a city that I've had in London, and I think that's probably due to British people's general temperament. It's because we're very standoffish as a people. On the London Underground, everyone's travelling in their own segmented bubbles, headphones on, eyes on their phone or a book, and if the train gets delayed or something strange happens, there's this feeling of dread that sinks in that's a mixture of, oh god, how long's this going to take, and, oh Jesus, I'm going to actually have to talk to these people, aren't I? This happened with me several years ago. My train broke down in a tunnel underground and the lights shut off. We were stuck there for about 3 hours. Everyone around me was panicking and treating the situation like it was the worst thing in the world, but personally, I loved it. I was having a great time. It was like I was living my own personal horror film. Boo to a Goose captures that bizarre atmosphere of the London Underground with an incredibly simple setup. Collect some interesting characters in a train carriage, delay the train, someone gets their purse stolen in the confusion, and just sit back and watch how people behave. I think it might just be the context that I bring to Boo to a Goose that meant its twist reveal that, surprise, this is actually set in a sci-fi dystopia, worked a lot better for me, because throughout I found it completely realistic. Even when the self-serious teacher starts choking one of the passengers because he won't show them what's in his bag to prove that he didn't steal the purse. Not to say something this horrible has ever happened to me, but if you've been in a situation like this, you'll know that people in London specifically are fucking nuts when a train gets held up for too long. Maybe I would have got what it was trying to do to draw a line between compliant characters and disobedient elements there to be corrected by a totalitarian regime if I actually remembered what the phrase Boo to a Goose means, which is a fairly outdated term that kind of threw me at the start. Although the posters around the carriage do work wonders to give you those hints that something's not quite right with this picture. The ending is utterly bizarre and hypnotic, enhanced by some amazing electronic music that really works to stress the sudden moment where it presents you with something that makes you cock your head and just go, wait, what am I actually looking at here? Huh? And as a commuter who has heard the phrase see it, say it, sorted far too many times over the years, this bit at the end made the entire thing worth it for me.
See it, say it, sorted.
Next episode is The Trolley Problem, a relatively simple little revenge thriller that starts on "It was a dark and stormy night." But simple ideas are often the best ones, and it feels like this episode exists purely so Reece Shearsmith can truly flex just how much emotion he can pack into a line. His performances over the last few years, particularly in Wise Owl in Series 7, already convinced me that he needs to go to Hollywood at some point after this, and the cinematic aspirations are written all over The Trolley Problem. This one just looks more filmic than the other episodes. So Reece plays the distraught father of a girl who died in tragic circumstances, who's tracked down the man who's technically responsible. It's the type of setup you can just chuck at an actor and have them squeeze as hard as they can to show just how good they are. Admittedly, they have done things like this before. The main one that springs to mind is The Riddle of the Sphinx, a revenge thriller with a cryptic crossword theme. Same basic deal here, but themed around the old philosophical problem of there's a runaway train going down 2 tracks, 5 people on one track, 1 person on the other. Do you flip the lever to make it kill 1 person, or sit back and do nothing? I like how they play around with the parameters of that question in the dialogue, because yeah, as much as it's set up to seem like there's only 2 answers, there aren't just 2 answers. Personally, what I'd do is I'd look at the levers in the tracks and then say to someone passing by, "Hey, can you do this for me?" "Sweet, okay, cheers, bye," and leave before they get a chance to say anything. You don't have to do it yourself, delegate that shit. I probably prefer the Riddle of the Sphinx because it is much quirkier and works to underscore the show's distinct identity, where it can naturally slip back and forth between being silly and serious. But the purpose of the trolley problem is less to be quirky and more to demonstrate the power that Reese and Steve can wield as actors when you give them the bare bones of a thriller, a dark house, a stormy night, and sky-high emotions. And it totally succeeds at that. Next up, we got the experimental formatting choice of Mulberry Close, an episode told entirely via someone's doorbell camera. This is the final entry in Inside Number 9's camera library. We had an episode told via CCTV cameras in Cold Comfort, webcams in Love is a Stranger. If either Reese or Steve end up watching this video, I really hope that in some future project, one of you buys an endoscope camera and does a story set entirely inside your own rectum. Mulberry Close is incredibly relatable if you're the type of person who hates having neighbours try and make small talk with you if you run into each other on the street. You want to tell them, look, the only thing we have in common is that we both live in a house. Let's just pretend that we don't know each other, yeah? The fact the viewer is stuck inside the doorbell camera with this one fixed angle serves to make the viewer feel trapped by this collection of weird eccentric neighbours sowing these wild theories that the quiet new guy has murdered his wife and that's why she hasn't been seen in a while. It's like they're ganging up on you and saying, well, you know, I heard them shouting the other night. I always felt he was a bit of a wrong 'un. I suppose the only problem is that the feeling of being trapped by the neighbours inside the doorbell works so well that it's not really a case of misdirection. When you're listening to these neighbours spin their wild theories and try and get inside the house to see if what they're looking at really is a case of the new neighbour murdering his wife, I was actually thinking, yeah, it's not the new guy I'm suspicious of, it's these people. Although playing Guess the Twist is part of the fun of Inside Number 9, and I did not see that ending coming and it was pure genius. This one's a lot of fun. Next up we got Ctrl-Alt-Esc, which is... God, this show is just magnificent sometimes. I was kind of expecting something reminiscent of the 12 Days of Christine to show up in the final series, because that episode, told from the perspective of someone whose life is flashing before their eyes as they're dying, was the episode that made Inside Number 9 famous. Like the trolley problem, Ctrl-Alt-Esc is something they've done before, but I'm not going to complain as long as I find it compelling. Like 12 Days, the story of a family on a day out at an escape room has been filled with all these little moments of potential double meaning. These are conversations that seem like they could be innocuous, or there could be something deeper going on. Millie's the jaded, cynical teenager who's going off to university, and there's this talk of the dad's past girlfriend, and the mum's carrying this veiled sadness about her, and these are great red herrings to throw you off from trying to deconstruct the story and figure out what's really going on here. This little chat here seems weird and out of left field at first.
It's been a really hard couple of years, Jace.
It could be hinting at maybe there's a divorce coming, which is backed up by Millie's little line here.
Okay. So we just keep on playing happy families. That you're the one that's going to have to live with it.
But these lines could also mean what they're revealed to mean. The dad's in a coma, and these are conversations drifting in from the waking world as they're talking about euthanasia. While Ctrl-Alt-Esc is great the first time round as you watch the cheap and cheesy dungeons start to get bizarrely real and terrifying before the entire facade falls away, and you see that it's actually about the father trying to figure out how to come out of his coma, but it definitely merits a rewatch to see these ingenious little double meanings. Jason may at first seem like he's desperately trying to hold the family together with something that only he seems to enjoy, but when you know what's going on, you see the significance of every tiny little detail, even down to the fact that throughout the experience, he's the one who's been chained to a bed, stuck in one room where he can barely communicate with anyone. And that scene with just him and Millie when the others have vanished into the passage where they talk about the family starting to break apart hits extra hard when you know that it's not Millie that's going away. He is. This one is just superb all round, especially that ending reveal that the key to getting him to wake up is the Roman numeral for 9 being hidden inside the word exit. Extra fitting given that Inside Number 9 itself is exiting after the last couple of episodes. In fact, I was thinking at the ending that this could have easily been the final episode, as this is probably up there as one of the most on-point endings the show's ever had. Next up, the penultimate episode, Curse of the Ninth, a period horror story about a piano tuner who's been tasked with finishing a deceased legendary composer's Ninth Symphony, left unfinished when he died in mysterious circumstances. I wasn't actually aware that this is a common superstition among classical composers, that their Ninth Symphony will be their last, and the result of finishing it will be their death. Kinda like the bizarre coincidence of loads of legendary rock stars dying at the age of 27. Curse of the Ninth is probably the weakest of the series, but that is a testament to just how good Series 9 was, that the weakest of the bunch is just another Inside Number 9 episode. It's a fun little ghost story that fits right in with writers of that genre from the late 19th century, early 20th. The ultimate point of this episode though is that, well, this is the penultimate episode of Inside Number 9, and it's less the story that matters and more the statement about the show itself. It makes a lot of sense to do a story about a creative work whose ending is cursed as the second to last episode of your show, because this is Inside Number 9 defying itself to reach a conclusion. It's almost like the show itself doesn't want to end, because what could happen if it ends? Metatextually, Curse of the Ninth is a masterstroke. Textually, it's just compelling. And finally, here we are. The last episode ever, Plodding On. Which I felt a bit deflated by, but I do think that was the point and it is highly appropriate. After so many different forms and genre of story that the show's taken over the years, an episode set ostensibly in the real world and centred on the after party of the final series of Inside Number 9, where Reese and Steve played themselves, makes a lot of sense. But there is a very specific reason why that makes a lot of sense. It's because even though the Inside Number 9 fandom is so parasocial that we all essentially feel as if we know Reese and Steve as people, hence the fact I usually refer to them in these videos by their first names as if we're mates, Plodding On is there to remind us that we do not know Reese Shearsmith and Steve Pemberton at all. So the show's over now and they're casting around for any new possible avenues for their careers. And one solo venture is obviously going to be more successful than the other option that would see them continuing to work together. Plodding On sends up the well-worn path of British comedy actors of past decades, who've come up in the industry working together, where one goes on to be incredibly successful and the other or others less so. And this has happened for so many British comedy actors. I remember in the mid-2000s I used to hear John Oliver show up as a bit part in various comedy shows on BBC Radio 4. Hollywood royalty Olivia Colman is still best known to me as Sophie from Peep Show. There's something small and pathetic about watching Reese playing himself, now resigned to Steve going off to do something successful at Amazon, ringing up former comedy partner Mark Gatiss and pitching him to be his replacement Steve in their new underwhelming show idea and getting a barely interested reaction. There's humility to this ending to offset the idea of this being a triumphant finale. They've gathered hundreds of former guests who featured in episodes over 9 series of the show in a room to show a masturbatory tribute video celebrating the legacy of the show. But it feels like an Inside Number 9 story and not just a metatextual fan wank, because they've reframed the show as a small and cheap BBC show whose inhabitants are always looking out for something better. And that makes total sense as the final twist in the show. My only real issue with Plodding On was that I felt that Reese and Steve were playing the wrong roles. I was imagining a version of this where Steve's the one who's desperately clinging onto the past, while Reese is being headhunted by someone quote unquote better. Not that Steve can't play a cold, calculating media personality, because he very much can, but I probably thought this because Steve had only just appeared on the comedy game show Taskmaster, where comedians take part in ridiculous tasks, where he revealed that in person, Steve Pemberton is probably one of the most adorable human beings who ever lived. Plodding On is a subversive ending, but it's subversive in the way that Inside Number 9 fanboys like me wouldn't be expecting. It's the kind of self-effacing send-off the show deserved, so in honour of that I'm going to do something similar and just stop the video now and cut to credits.